Okay, so get ready because today we are diving deep into American history.
Right.
But, and this is really cool, we're looking at it through a source you found that tells the story of America in Hindi.
That's right.
It's kind of like seeing something you thought you knew really well.
Yeah.
But then suddenly you notice all these little details that you never saw before.
Exactly. It adds a really interesting new dimension to the story, doesn't it?
Totally, yeah. So why don't we start at the beginning?
Okay.
With the colonial period.
Yeah.
Now, I've always thought of Jamestown in 1607 as just like one of the first settlements.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
But the way your source talks about it, it's like it was this huge turning point.
Yeah.
It was the seed that America grew from.
Definitely.
And it also really focuses on how European powers, especially England, slowly started to gain more and more influence.
Right.
And you can really see how that set the stage for the conflicts that came later.
Oh, absolutely. It's like watching a game of chess unfold. You know, you see all the pieces moving into place.
Yeah. And speaking of conflict.
Yes.
That takes us to the American Revolution. But here's where things get really interesting.
Uh-huh.
Your source emphasizes the role of local militias and their guerrilla tactics.
Right.
It's something that we don't often hear a lot about in the traditional American stories.
Yeah, definitely.
It portrays the colonists' fight for independence as this real underdog story, you know,
I see.
full of clever strategies and just pure determination.
Yeah. It makes you see it in a whole new light, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So America wins its independence and the nation is born, but then comes the hard part.
Yeah.
Building a nation.
Mm-hmm.
And your source is very clear that it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Not at all.
What I found really interesting was how it talked about the creation of the Constitution.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just a document.
Mm-hmm.
It was this battleground of ideas and compromises.
Definitely.
And it wasn't easy to reach those compromises.
Right.
And your source doesn't shy away from the really tough issues.
It doesn't.
It dives right into the debates about how much power the federal government should have versus the states. The compromises they had to make about slavery.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy?
What?
These are issues that we're still dealing with today.
Exactly. It shows how those early decisions still have an impact.
It reminds us that America was built on both unity and division.
Yes.
And that's a theme that we see over and over again throughout its history.
Absolutely. And speaking of division,
Yeah.
the next part of the deep dive takes us to westward expansion.
Oh, yeah.
This was a time of incredible growth for America,
Definitely.
but it also caused a lot of conflict.
It did. We all know about the Louisiana Purchase and the Indian Removal Act.
Right.
But your source presents them in a way that really made me stop and think.
Oh, really? How so?
It focuses on the people who were displaced.
The Native Americans.
Yeah, the Native American tribes who were forced to leave their ancestral lands.
Right.
It forces us to confront the really dark side of American progress.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that history is often written from the perspective of the winners. And your source encourages us to think about those untold stories.
Yeah.
The voices that have been silenced or marginalized.
Right. And then, of course, comes the Civil War.
Yeah.
This is where things get really intense.
Mm-hmm.
Your source doesn't hold back in describing the horrors of this conflict.
It paints a very vivid picture.
It does. And it shows how deeply this war divided the nation.
Right. It left lasting scars on America's psyche.
It did. But what I found fascinating was how your source emphasized the role of everyday people.
Ordinary people.
Yeah, both the soldiers fighting on the battlefields and the people back home.
Right.
It really brings home the human cost of this ideological struggle.
Yes. It's a stark reminder that progress often comes at a terrible price.
It does. But even in the midst of all that darkness, your source also highlights the resilience of the human spirit.
Right.
The hope that people had for a better future.
And that hope really fuels America's next chapter.
Yeah.
It becomes a global power.
Exactly. The source talks about America's rapid industrialization, its economic dominance, and how it emerged as this major force on the world stage. And World War I and World War II, as your source describes them, they weren't just conflicts happening somewhere else.
No.
They were crucibles that tested America's strength.
Definitely.
And ultimately solidified its position as a world leader.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's fascinating how your source then connects these global conflicts to the start of the Cold War. It frames this whole era as a battle of ideologies between the capitalist West and the communist East, with America right at the center of it.
Yeah.
It really highlights all the anxieties and uncertainties of that time.
It was a lot of fear.
It felt like the world was constantly on the brink of nuclear war.
It did. And then almost as suddenly as it began,
Yeah,
the Soviet Union collapses.
it does. And America is left as the sole superpower.
Right.
Your source really explores what that meant for America.
The implications of that shift.
Yeah, all the challenges and responsibilities that come with that kind of power.
And that brings us to modern America,
It does.
a nation that is still trying to figure out its place in the world.
Trying to come to terms with its legacy.
Absolutely. Your source leaves us with a sense of America's enduring power, but also its vulnerability.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even the most powerful empires are not immune to the forces of history.
Wow, that was incredible. This deep dive has really changed the way I think about American history.
That's great to hear.
It's been so interesting to explore these events through the lens of your Hindi source.
Yeah.
It's like I'm seeing them for the first time,
I know what you mean.
and I'm noticing all these perspectives and nuances that I never even considered before.
I think that's the power of looking at things from a different angle.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to encourage all our listeners to think about how this unique perspective has shaped their own understanding of America.
That's a great point.
To consider what it means for America's past and its role in the world today.
I think that's a really important question for all of us to consider.
It is.
And hopefully this deep dive has given everyone some food for thought.
Some new insights to ponder,
Exactly.
and maybe even inspired them to learn even more.
I hope so.
Because the story of America, it's a story that continues to unfold.
It does.
And it's a story that affects us all.
It really does.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into American history.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.
Sounds good.
Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.
Absolutely.